are up again today. Inflation is starting to pick up in this country. Who's going to get hurt? The poorest families are going to get hurt. When the interest rates go up, it impacts them like that. Already what we've seen is gas prices are up, food prices are up. The poorest families, I grew up in a poor family, when those things go up, it has an immediate impact on these families. So we cannot be wasting these dollars. So it's pretty frustrating to me that we would sit here and spend money like this when we've already paid the state revenues in general are about $1 trillion. We already gave them $400 billion, and now we're going to give them another $350 billion. So this is wrong.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Look, the notion that our states and municipalities are in some kind of fiscal crisis is just couldn't be more wrong. It's just factually untrue, as Senator Scott pointed out. In fact, amazingly enough, the numbers are in now for 2020. State and local tax collections were actually $20 billion higher than 2019. And 2019 was an all-time record for revenue. So let me say this again. Think about this. 2020 was an all-time record high revenue year for states and local governments across the country. Take California. If you take 2019, 2020, and what they're projecting for 2021, which we're well into now, so this period of time is mostly behind us, they're projecting $38 billion more than they had projected back in 2019. They're blowing the doors off their estimates of their revenue. That's what's happening. Now, despite that, last year we gave, and if you include state and local governments, about $500 billion on top of the record amount of revenue that they were already collecting. And now we're being told they need another $350 billion? Really? A lot of the money we've sent them is still unspent. States are sitting on at least $60 billion in rainy day funds. This is going to do more harm than good. The states that have long-term fiscal imbalances have no incentive to fix them. There's no reforms associated with this. Insolvent states like Illinois aren't going to do anything to fix those problems. And, even if there were a shortfall, states are sovereign entities. They can raise taxes, they can borrow money, or they could cut spending. So when we hear that, what about all the services that are going to be so dramatically curtailed? Well, how is that when you've got a record amount of revenue? And how about a state like New Jersey, which their latest budget, they just increased spending? This has nothing to do with COVID. This has nothing to do with the economy. This has everything to do with just throwing a whole big pile of money at fiscally irresponsible states.
Well, thank you all for joining us. If you didn't know better, you would say that this behemoth of a spending bill is all about demoralizing the American people, making them believe that things are worse than they ever could have thought. But here is what we do know. Relief should be targeted, it should be timely, it should be temporary. It should go to people who really need the relief. And we have Tennesseans every single day who we're working to come around them and really shore them up during this crisis because they need that relief. What we also know is that this bill would reward bad actions because states who have not managed themselves well are the ones who are going to benefit from this. It is like manna from heaven for them. They have pensions that are not funded. They have state governments that have not been well managed. And so now they're looking to the federal government to come in and bail them out. Our governor in Tennessee has joined other governors to stand up against the funding mechanism in this bill. People that need help need the help, and the relief should be targeted to those individuals and to those programs. But to print money, to pile up debt, to make certain that we are taking that debt to market, and people like China, who are not our friend, are going to thereby buy and hold that debt is not responsible to taxpayers, and it definitely is not responsible to the taxpayers of tomorrow, our children who have been so adversely impacted during COVID-19.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Now, I'm without question here to fight for those who truly need the help. We want to make sure that those that are still hurting get the help that they need. But I'm also called to protect the future of this country, to protect the future of my children and my grandchildren. And what I don't want to see happen is to punish hardworking Kansans who we feel like we are being forced to bail out blue states who've overreacted and totally shut down their economies and shut down their schools. Look, overall, this package is so full of pork it smells like bacon. And now it's dripping grease. It's dripping grease, and that grease are Democrat projects like Speaker Pelosi's Underground Railroad project in the Silicon Valley and Senator Schumer's Bridge to Nowhere from his backyard into Canada, which have been bailed out by the parliamentarian now. But there's still lots of bad news. Radical Democrats still want to bail out mismanaged states at the expense of hardworking taxpayers with dollars that are being distributed in an unfair manner. For instance, my home state of Kansas is getting shorted $400 million. So we're taking $400 million from Kansas and giving it to some other state. But you know who the biggest loser is? The state with the shortest stick is the state of Georgia. They're having taken from them $1 billion. That's B as in boy, $1 billion, over $1 billion from the state of Georgia to move those dollars into some other state. I don't know how any congressman or senator from the state of Georgia could possibly vote for this bill. How in the world could anybody vote for a bill that's taking money when it's not being done fairly? This is not fair. It's not American. Thank you.
Well, folks, here we are again to talk about what is in this atrocious $1.9 trillion non-COVID bill. And today we're really focused on the blue state bailouts. Yes, folks, the blue state bailouts. So the good people of Iowa, God bless them, because you know what? This past year during COVID-19, they passed a status quo budget. A status quo budget, and our cash reserves are full. Why? Because our Republican governor, Kim Reynolds, and the Republican-led House and Senate in the state of Iowa has managed our finances very, very well. That's what every state should do. But instead, through this non-COVID package, we have the good people of Iowa being asked to support blue state bailouts. And you know who receives the most in these blue state bailouts? Wow, this is really odd, folks. I don't know how this happens. Chuck Schumer's state of New York and Nancy Pelosi's state of California. Unbelievable how that works, isn't it, folks? But what is atrocious about this is that we are punishing those states that manage their finances and have opened up their economies in a safe and responsible manner. And yet we're rewarding those states that have ratcheted down on their economies. They haven't opened up. They've killed small business jobs in their states. And those hard workers in our states that are managing our finances well are being punished. So think about that, folks, as you're asked to respond about the non-COVID package. This is what's in it. Bailouts for blue states and favors for Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi.
Just to show you how bad this bill is, there's more money in this to bail out union pension funds than all the money combined for vaccine distribution and testing. It's so bad that there's more money for transit projects than there is money to transport and distribute the vaccines. This is so far afield, it does very little to touch the pandemic. That's what we should be about. That's certainly what Tennesseans expect, and they do not expect to be bailing out mismanaged states, and that's exactly what this is aimed to do. Thank you.
Well, this bill is not about coronavirus relief. This is a wish list of liberal spending. This is packed with pork. And yesterday we pointed out the Tunnel of Love, Pelosi's Tunnel of Love to Silicon Valley, and Schumer's Bridge to Canada. As we pointed those out, those have now been removed from the bill. But those were small items compared to the amount of money that New York and California are going to get in this blue state bailout. Governors around the country are up in arms about this. My home state governor in Wyoming is joined 20 other Republican governors, and it is bipartisan because the Democrat governor of Kansas, Governor Kelly, has joined in this, saying, and it was in the today's USA Today, GOP governors called, 21 GOP governors, and then you read it also, Governor Kelly, called Biden's relief bill biased. That's what it is. This is a biased piece of legislation. They got it right. They talk about how punishing it is to their states who didn't do a complete shutdown at the time of coronavirus. They made a decision to try to keep people working, keep people on the job, let people go about their lives instead of shutting down like New York and California did. So if you're trying to do a distribution formula to help states who have been hurt most by the virus, you might say, how many people were sick there? How many people lost their lives there? How has the virus itself impacted the health of the people? Not saying which states chose to shut it down, clamp down, with the wink and the nod from Joe Biden running for president, saying, keep it closed, I'll make sure you get paid off big. That's what this is. This is a payoff to his Democrat supporters in Illinois, in California, in New York, and he's asking people from all around the country who have done and acted responsibly during all of this for them to pay the bill.
Well, special thanks to Senator Ernst and also all of the great work that Senator Scott's done on this issue, being as a governor and again, one of the people that truly is an expert in what we're talking about today. I get a lot of correspondence in the office. We all do, on a weekly and monthly basis. And right at the top of that list is major concerns regarding the COVID relief bill. And certainly that's a misnomer. There's very little in the bill that has anything to do with the economic damage from COVID or the health effects of COVID also. But what I'd like to do is, we've done such a great job about talking this. I thought that I would talk about some of the correspondence that I actually get from Arkansans. These aren't politicians. These aren't people that are up here telling the story. Pamela from Yellville. Pamela says, this budget will further harm economic growth by using my tax dollars to fund irresponsible governors. Scott from Springdale. Arkansans do not want to see our tax dollars funneled to these poorly managed states and cities. Paul from Van Buren. We do not need a bailout for poorly run cities or monies to fund anything not directly related to COVID relief. $1.9 trillion is way too big. I think that really sums it up. So they understand this isn't about COVID spending. This is about opportunistic spending. And the other thing that I'm greatly saddened about is that we talk a lot about unity. We talk a lot about bipartisanship. No Republicans, and I say this as the ranking member on the Ag Committee, no Republican has anything at all to do with bringing this bill forward. Thank you.
Well, this has been an emotional year for all of us. We've gone through something none of us have ever experienced before, a pandemic. People have died, people have gotten grievously ill. Many of them have recovered, but many more have been anxious as a result of losing their job or their livelihood, their way of life, been separated from their friends and families for a year or more. I know some haven't seen their parents or grandparents for a year because of fear of spreading the virus. That's why Congress has responded so dramatically over 5 different pieces of legislation over the last year, and it's all been on a bipartisan basis. We spent roughly $4 trillion trying to deal with combating the virus, coming up with new treatments, and ultimately a vaccine, which is the key to putting this in the rearview mirror, but also helping to mitigate the economic losses and deal with the anxiety people are feeling about being able to put food on the table or pay their rent or pay their mortgage. So we've been through a lot of different emotions this last year. But I have to tell you what the Democrats are doing with this $1.9 trillion spending splurge makes me angry. And it should make everybody in the country angry. Because what is happening here is what Rahm Emanuel famously said, never let a crisis go to waste. And they want to, under the guise of trying to help people, they want to exploit people. They want to take money and use it on pet projects in their states that's unneeded. They want to divert money that, under the guise of being for COVID-19, to things that have nothing to do with either the public health or economic consequences of this virus. So that should make everybody in the country angry that people would think so little of them, would disrespect them so much that they would try to tell a lie about what this bill is about. This bill is not about COVID-19. It's a Trojan horse for a liberal wish list of other policies that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer know they can't get done any other way. It's disgraceful, and it should make all of us angry.
We can answer any questions anybody has. Yes.
A few people here today co-sponsored Senator Scott's Justice Act last session, got the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. What is the appetite among Senate Republicans for police reform, and what in the bill that is set to come forward are
If you remember, it's pretty disgusting what happened last year, because Senator Scott, Tim Scott, proposed a bill. We supported it, and the Democrats would not do anything. They would. He said, "Give us your amendments. Tell us how you want to improve it." No, they just voted against it. So the Democrats don't want to do justice reform. I know Republicans, we want to make sure that there's accountability, but we want to make sure people are treated with respect and dignity. I don't know if you guys want to add anything.
Can I ask a question of Senator Cornyn? President Biden has criticized states like Texas that have relaxed COVID restrictions, including masking too soon, in his opinion. He said it was a big mistake. Do you have any reaction to that?
Well, President Biden has a lot of problems to take care of. He's got a crisis at the border that he calls a challenge and not a crisis, dismantling all of our immigration laws and protections to protect our border. And so I don't think he's got a lot to say about preaching to my state about how we've handled this COVID-19 virus. Part of the problem here that Senator Scott and others have pointed out is that many states have been overly restrictive in terms of opening the economy, safely going back to school and the like. And what they want, because they have not been able to meet their revenue needs, they want the federal government to bail them out. So I don't think Washington has a lot to say to states like my state about what the appropriate reopening measures are. And the fact of the matter is, if you want to wear a mask, you can still wear a mask. But at some point, the government needs to quit making arbitrary rules that do not have any demonstrable connection with the public health.
I guess I'm wondering, though, if you're concerned about more variants or any rise in cases or deaths when we're so close to having people vaccinated, possibly by...
Well, there's a lot of pseudoscience out there. There are a lot of people who, maybe like me, a recovering lawyer who's had to try to learn science. But there's also a lot of scaremongering that's going on. And we see successful states like Senator Scott's state that successfully reopened their economy. We need to look at this as not just being a one-dimensional issue. We need to think about the victims of domestic violence that have been cooped up with their abuser, with the suicides that have taken place, the children that have fallen farther and farther behind. This is not just a one-dimensional problem. We need to look at the whole thing. And I think Governor Abbott in the state of Texas, I'm proud of the work we've done. I'm proud of the fact we're getting more shots in the arms of people who need it. And I have to tell you, rather than spending roughly 1% of this $1.9 trillion on vaccines, we ought to be all about getting shots in arms of as many people as fast as we can. That's going to be the key to defeating the virus.
We'll take one more question on the bill.
Senators, wondering if you might be able to speak a little bit about what amendments you might plan to offer during the vote-a-rama tomorrow, and then also just what the GOP strategy going into this amendment session is going to look like.
Well, you know what's nice is everybody gets to propose their amendment. I think border security is a big deal. If you look at what we ought to be focused on right now, is we ought to be focused on opening our schools. We ought to be focused on securing our borders. We shouldn't be appeasing dictators around the world. We shouldn't be allowing men to compete in women's sports. We shouldn't be paying for abortions with U.S. tax dollars overseas in foreign countries. We ought to focus on the things that are important to families. Number one, they want to get a job. Number two, they want their kids to get a good education. Number three, they want to be in a safe community. And if you look at this so-called COVID bill that Democrats have, it has nothing to do with any of those things. They're doing just the opposite. They won't open our schools. They're hurting our economy, like with the Keystone Pipeline. That's what people care about, and I know that's what I'm going to talk about in my amendments on the floor.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Senator, sir.